The first case of its kind, a hidden reality. Some cases make you realize that there are hidden aspects of this world. People who live among us but are unlike anyone else. Composition that seems like it belongs in a movie. Yet even in films, no one dares to depict what truly happened here. The only question that will haunt you is, how can such stories actually exist around us? Disturbing discovery. In October 1998, the Chicago Police Department received a report from Lincoln Park, Illinois, about a foul odor emanating from an apartment in a residential building. Stench had persisted for several days. Officers immediately responded to the call to investigate the situation. Upon arrival, everything seemed normal from the outside. However, the moment they opened the apartment door, the stench intensified with every step they took. The odor led them to the bedroom, where they found the naked body of a man in his 50s, brutally slaughtered. His head had been severed from his body, and multiple stab wounds covered his torso. His hands and feet were bound with an electrical cord. The scene was gruesome, prompting the officers to immediately call in the forensic investigation team. Detectives noticed no signs of forced entry on the apartment's doors or windows, suggesting that the victim knew his killer. While searching the apartment, they found traces of narcotics on the living room table, along with scattered quantities in various locations. The apartment was spacious, consisting of 4 well-furnished rooms, indicating that the victim lived comfortably. Despite reports that he lived alone, neighbors confirmed that visitors frequently came and went. Everything about the apartment suggested that there was a much bigger story behind this horrific crime. Forensic report and investigation. After securing the crime scene, the body was transported to the coroner's office. The initial examination revealed that the victim had been electrocuted using the same cord he was bound with. There were also signs of blunt force trauma to the head, inflicted with a wooden object. However, the primary cause of death was multiple stab wounds to the neck, likely inflicted with a cleaver. Investigators began identifying the victim and tracing his connections. He was identified as Richard Coleman, a former law enforcement officer who had been dismissed from service years ago due to misconduct. Despite his dismissal, he had told those around him that he had resigned voluntarily, even displaying photos of himself in uniform inside his apartment to maintain the illusion. After leaving the force, he had pursued a career as a lawyer, opening a legal consultancy office in the city center. However, investigations revealed that he was not actively practicing law. His office was merely a front for a much darker secret. Detectives questioned the neighbors and learned that 2 people had been living with Richard, Mark Taylor and Sarah Taylor, a married couple. However, they had disappeared without a trace following the murder. Further examination of the crime scene revealed that the victim's keys, car, and money were missing, leading investigators to suspect robbery as a motive. All signs pointed toward Mark and Sarah, the couple who had suddenly vanished. Investigators started digging into the couple's background, uncovering photos of them. The shocking revelation was that Mark was unemployed, and so was Sarah, raising suspicions about their connection to Richard Coleman. 2 days later, authorities uncovered a crucial lead. Richard's apartment and vehicles had been sold to a man carrying a new identification card. Upon closer inspection, it became clear that the photo on the ID belonged to Mark, but the personal details were forged. His name, profession, and address had been altered. By tracking the fraudulent transactions, the police managed to locate Mark and Sarah in Miami, Florida. It didn't take long before law enforcement moved in and arrested them. Shocking confessions. When confronted with the evidence, Mark and Sarah had no choice but to confess. However, the story they told was even more shocking than the crime itself. Mark Taylor, 38, was unemployed and married to Sarah Taylor, 29. They had 2 children, a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old. Financially struggling, they had no permanent residence, frequently moving between relatives' homes. Mark's mother suggested he reach out to his relative, Richard Coleman, for help finding a job. When Mark visited Richard's office, the latter immediately offered him assistance, going a step further by inviting him and Sarah to stay in his apartment. Mark eagerly accepted the offer, excited about the prospect of living in a spacious, well-furnished apartment. A private room was allocated to him and Sarah. However, from the very first day, the couple noticed something strange. The apartment's landline phone rang constantly. The calls were suspicious, often from people requesting illicit services, some speaking in an inappropriate manner. When Richard returned home, the truth was revealed. He was not the respectable figure Mark had imagined. Richard was living a double life. Over time, Richard began exploiting the couple, forcing them to obey his commands through threats, leveraging his experience in law enforcement. The situation escalated to illegal activities, trapping Mark and Sarah in his dark world. Every attempt to escape was met with threats. He had no way out. After several failed escape attempts, Mark and Sarah realized that their only way to break free was to eliminate Richard permanently. They carefully planned the murder, and on the fateful night, they drugged Richard's drink. Once he lost consciousness, Mark tied him up with an electrical cord and electrocuted him until he regained awareness. He then beat and stabbed him repeatedly before finally decapitating him with a cleaver. After the murder, the couple cleaned the crime scene, stole Richard's belongings, and fled to Miami. After standing trial, both Mark and Sarah were convicted of premeditated murder. The court sentenced them to life imprisonment. This case remains one of the most bizarre ever uncovered, where no one was truly innocent. Each individual had become entangled in a world of crime and deception. But in the end, were Mark and Sarah victims or criminals? Were they simply following a dark path with no escape? Till we meet again in another case.